Taylor, so it looks like I need your permission to screen share. It's not letting me at this moment.
Okay, you should be good now.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to give it a couple more minutes while everybody starts coming into the call. Just for my reference, can everybody hear me? Awesome, awesome. Well, hello, everyone. Good morning. We're really excited to get started on this series this morning. We're going to give it about until 9:02 until we get started, just to make sure that we've got everybody here on the call. As far as the Zoom protocol, if you want to utilize the chat, you are more than welcome to utilize the chat. You may also use your hand features or different things like that. So if anything comes up with questions throughout the call, feel free to use that chat feature, and we'll go ahead and get started here in just a minute. All right, awesome. So it's 9:02, so we're gonna go ahead and get started just to make sure we don't take any time away from our amazing speakers that we've got today here. The title of this series is We Are All Losing It, How to Work at Home and Make It Work for You personally and professionally. We are most certainly very excited to have these speakers with us today. And let me just make sure I can go through here just to make sure that if you're not a member of the YPN at this point, I definitely encourage you to look into becoming a member. We have some amazing sponsors that we're working with this year. We've got the Howard Hughes Corporation, McFarland Insurance Agency, Davis, Agnor, Rappaport, and Skalny, and then Dembo Jones Certified Public Accountants. So some amazing sponsors that are working with us this year. And if you need any of their services, I would most certainly recommend reaching out to them. So today we've got a really great, I would say, panel and moderator here that we're going to have with us today. We've got Zachary Cochran, founder and coach of and proprietor of Cochran Coaching LLC. We've got Deborah Stallings, President and CEO of her HR administration company. And we've got Sal Scatino, a licensed clinical professional counselor. So we thank you all. And I know that Zachary will do a much better job introducing himself and the rest of the team here. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Zachary for us to go ahead and get started.
Kelsey, thanks so much. Really excited to be having this conversation with each of you, Sal and Deborah, and to everyone who's attending this morning. Really glad that you joined us. I think it'll be really a fruitful time where you'll be able to take away some really important lessons and be able to apply practical tips automatically to your life and to this crazy situation that we find ourselves in. Man, it is a challenging situation. We're going to do a poll in a minute, but just to give you a little bit more background on myself before we do. I started my business about 3 years ago, Cochran Coaching LLC, and moved from New York City to Columbia, which is where I'm based out of at this point. I have my primary group of people that I work with are young professionals, and helping young professionals figure out what their career path should be is really what I enjoy doing. And my goal is to help young professionals flourish in their careers and in their lives. And so with that, I am going to just give everyone a chance to answer the poll here. And then after our poll, we will introduce our speakers. All right, so almost everyone has voted. Give you a few more seconds to do that. All right, and so, wow, we've got a lot of mixed emotions here. A lot of emotions going on: powerful, peaceful, joyful, some scared. I can certainly relate to many of these, and then just a mix of other emotions. And that is not surprising given that this season has been so turbulent in 2020 with all of the many challenges with the pandemic, social and racial injustice, election season, and just in general, learning what does it mean to work at home, or how do we just navigate this very Zoom heavy season of our lives. Okay, so well, with that, I would love to introduce Sal and Deborah, but to let them introduce themselves will be better than me attempting to do that. So Sal, I'm going to hand it over to you to give our audience a sense of who you are.
Wonderful, thank you, Zachary. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sal Scatino. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and success and growth consultant and public speaker at Community Mental Health Associates. We are a private practice located in both Millersville and Catonsville, Maryland. I've been working in the psych field for about 7 years now. I did 5 years at Shepherd Pratt Mental Health Hospital, and now I work in private practice. And I specialize in treating trauma, anxiety, and depressive disorders for all ages. And yeah, that's me.
Great, thank you, Sal. That'll become really useful in this conversation about resilience. Deborah, if you'd please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Zachary. Good morning, everyone. I'm Deborah Stallings, and I am President and CEO of Anew. Anew is a full-service human resource management, training, and professional services firm. We are headquartered in Columbia, Maryland. We've been in business for more than 21 years. We provide services to government, private sector, and nonprofit clients. I am certified as a senior professional in HR and work primarily as a strategist and advisor to executives and management to help enhance and improve the workplace practices, policies, processes, procedures, et cetera, to make workplaces better. So I'm delighted to be here with you all this morning. I've been a member of the Chamber probably about as long as I've been in business. I've served on the Chamber's board of directors in the past. I established the HR group in Howard County in 2001. So I'm really excited to be with you all today.
We're so delighted to have you. So Deborah, thank you very, very much. All right, so with that, our title of this webinar is We're All Losing It, How to Work at Home and Make It Work for You Personally and Professionally. So this is a challenging thing to moderate in a sense that there's both the personal side and the professional side. And so what better way to do this than to bring in Sal to talk really about the personal side of the resilience and emotions and how we engage at home. And then I'll pull in Deborah as well to talk about just professionally, how do we respond to our managers? How should we engage with our new coworkers, as it were, and some of those types of things. So we'll sort of intersperse between the two panelists, and I'm going to just kick it off with, well, first I'll set the stage and then I'll kick it off with a question to you, Sal. So to set the stage, my questions will be a little general at first, and then we'll get more practical as we go. I am going to end with questions to the audience. And so what I'd like you to do if you are attending this is to think about what questions do you have. There's a Q&A feature that you should be able to use to send questions to us as panelists. I'll see those and moderate those at the end of the event. The end being probably about 30 minutes from now. We'll be through my questions and we'll go to your questions. And you can send those or submit those at any time. With that, Sal, if you tell us what's resilience and how can we become more resilient?
Okay, so resilience is how we respond to high stressful situations. So it's what we take away from changing of environments, from going through adverse life experiences, and how we hold those messages and lessons for ourselves moving forward. Right? Resilience is the ability to navigate transition and effectively move from stage to stage of whatever's happening currently in our life. And the way in which we want to do that is we want to come at it from an approach of an open mind. Like the pandemic, it brought on this uncertainty and confusion as to how to respond to our environment and our threat. Because how an emotion works is it makes sense of what's happening outside of us, right? And then it formulates that information into the mind's eye, and it says, how do I appropriately stand up to this? What do I have to do? What's within my control, right? And when the brain is presented with something like this, where it's uncertain and it's unknown, we look at it from a three different kind of pronged approach for the brain in terms of its survival instinct happening in that moment. And that is, where's my responsibility? What can I do about this? Next, what can I control? What's within my power? And lastly is, where's my safety? Am I in danger? And I feel like a lot of people have been kind of navigating and tossing between control and safety. So with resilience, we want to look at it through an open mind, because it allows us to formulate and find other possibilities to said problem. And I know right now, this is an evolving, changing thing every single day. So we really don't know what the climate's going to be like 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, 6 months from now, next year. So it's really being able to look at it one step at a time and just identifying what we control, because we're really just tossing back and forth between what we can do and then how to properly deal with it and confront it. So just being patient with yourself, having an open mind, taking the lessons and the messages each day moving forward is going to be monumental in creating a resilient mind and perspective.
Wow, thank you, Sal. I really appreciate the open mind aspect of that. And I think that when we're curious, we have a better chance at being resilient than the alternative. And so resilience can depend a lot upon our context. And for many of us, we're in a permanent or worse, maybe an indefinite work at home situation. So Deborah, with your background in human resources, I suspect you have a lot more familiarity with this sort of scenario that we're in than many of us. What are some of the most common challenges that you see with moving to a permanent work at home situation?
So, so some of the challenges that I'm seeing and hearing from clients and from their employees have to do with the fact that, first of all, there's a lot of stress and anxiety associated with where we are with working from home, because, you know, for a large part, we were kind of thrust into this situation as a result of COVID-19. And then, as Zachary was saying earlier, we are experiencing a number of other challenges in the world simultaneously. Depending on where you live in the world, you're dealing with wildfires, you're dealing with, you know, social injustice issues. We are dealing with the presidential and other elections coming up in less than a month. And so there's just a lot of stress. And then in addition to that, we have family concerns. We are now parenting and child schooling our children from home. We're dealing with financial concerns if we are unemployed or our employers have reduced our work schedules. There are some serious health concerns. You know, we've lost more than 210,000 or almost 210,000 people to COVID-19. There's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know when this is going to end. We're hearing different things from scientists and doctors and politicians, et cetera. There are supply chain interruptions. There are economic concerns. And so there are a number of challenges that we are dealing with in the workplace today. And so this is impacting, you know, those of us that are teleworking and working remotely. So finding a way to cope and work successfully through this and live, you know, for today, live a happy life in the midst of a chaotic situation is the challenge that, you know, we're working to work through and deal with today.
Living a happy life does seem to be the challenge, and that's a perfect segue into my next question. So Sal, with working from home being so challenging, and again, we have a lot of mixed emotions from the poll represented, what's the secret? How do you live happily in the midst of a storm?
I think some things that we've got to be cognizant of is when we're establishing a work environment at home, we have a designated place to call our work environment, right? And when you have that place, you want to make sure that it's organized for a productive mind, right? When your brain goes into a bedroom, it will associate the bedroom with being relaxed, with being calm, with, you know, kind of decompressing after the day. So that's how your brain is going to respond in those moments. So it's got to make sure that the environment is conducive to what you're trying to get out of it. So if you're trying to be productive, have your desk set up, be organized, have those things in place. What's also going to be huge is setting expectations and ground rules with those who you live with. So making sure they know the hours that you're going to be working, right? And they're going to be respectful and they'll give you that quiet space to do so in. With that said, we also want to be able to take breaks. So what I'm noticing right now is they're kind of falling on one end or the other of the spectrum of working. They're either working themselves to death because they're not able to create parameters or boundaries around their workday because they're not used to having so much freedom, or they go the other direction and they're constantly distracted by, you know, kids, TV, YouTube, social media, because it's at our fingertips. It's so easily readable right now. So in those environments, we want to take away more rewarding stimuli if you want to be more productive. So making sure that if you know you're the type of person that's going to gravitate to the phone and scroll and scroll and scroll, getting that out of that workspace and making sure that's in a distance where you're not going to just grab onto it and you're not going to, you know, basically engulf yourself into it. But what's also huge is taking breaks. This was something that I struggled with in the beginning, was knowing when to disengage and take a step back. Because when we do that, that's when we create a reset in the brain. And when I say taking a break, I don't mean scrolling on your phone. Because what you're doing is you're fixating your eyes. And when you're still fixated, you're stimulating on whatever you're looking at. So you're still depleting energy of your brain, right? Be mindful that our brain takes 20% of our body's energy. So if you're constantly stimulating it and causing more and more things to look at and to make sense of in your brain, it's going to deplete itself of its resources. So taking a break is going to be going outside, getting some fresh air, taking a walk. When you do that, you're expediting the adaptive information processing in your brain. So if you have any emotions with, difficulty with work, or, you had an argument with your spouse or your kids or something like that, because you're going to be around them way more, right? And when we're around people way more, we're going to get more annoyed, more frustrated with them just because we see them so often. That's why we also need to take breaks, is so we can disengage, because the heart's going to grow fonder with more time apart. So you got to make sure that you're getting out, you're taking care of yourself, but in doing so, it's going to allow you to sit with what you're dealing with and what you're going through. And also, please, this is going to be probably the most important takeaway. And we talked about this and alluded to it before we opened up the session with you guys, the meeting. And that is making sure you're balancing the time where you're watching the news. News is good for information and to become educated on what's happening. But if you go across the threshold where you're obsessing over it, what you're going to do is you're going to fixate your attention and energy towards that. And it's going to distract you from the things that are more important. Whether that's spending time with your family, this is a good time to start doing that you're at home all the time. So creating time to hang with the family nights, game nights, things like that, re-engage and rekindle old relationships with friends, loved ones, that stuff, old hobbies, interests. But taking the time to do that and doing it in a productive way where you're setting the brakes and you're being intentional. And the last little bit that I want to throw at you is scheduling. Right, so you want to give yourself X amount of hours a day to work, and also scheduling your breaks, right? Being very intentional about that is going to be huge, because then your brain's going to know what to expect. That's why it likes going to an office. It likes having a work day, because you know what to expect. You know what you're dealing with. You know what's within your control. So having that, but it's better than a to-do list. It's better to schedule than have a to-do list. This to-do list, especially in these times where we're struggling to find boundaries, it's going to overwhelm the brain. So what you want to do is say, hey, in this allotted amount of time, and this adheres to the Parkinson's principle, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with if you're young entrepreneurs, that if you tell your brain you're going to do one thing in an X amount of time, the brain's going to do what it can. It's going to pull from all its resources to do that. Saying, I'm going to work in this amount of time. I'm going to spend time with my family in this amount of time. It's very productive to that mind's eye. But with scheduling, making sure that you block those times off, it'll make you more productive and less overwhelmed. And those are my tidbits for that. Yeah, and take care of yourself. We're on a difficult time here. Encourage yourself, show empathy for you and your loved ones. We're all going through this together, but we also all deal with it and take different perceptions and interpretations from it. So let's be open to that. Let's listen to one another. Be active listeners for each other, yourself, and I think it'll allow things to be more smooth.
Wow, that's a lot of very practical tips there, and very validating too, Sal, as I think about the ways in which I've struggled to adapt. And even my wife and I are talking right now about, well, when are we going to turn off our phones for the night, right? And setting like an actual boundary around that so that we're not letting screen time bleed into bedtime. But so the takeaway I got from that was that living happily can be, even if it's challenging, it can be possible, right? In these kinds of challenging times, if we're wise about what we're doing. But that said, a lot of times our employers can foster that sense of well-being, or they can erode it. So Deborah, many of us as young professionals have experienced working for good bosses, but even then, we don't necessarily know what's normal, especially with our limited workplace experiences. And so in your professional opinion, what tools and resources should be available to work at home employees?
Okay, so I just wanted to go back for just a moment to the last question that was asked of Sal, and just add that there is a book called Tiny Habits. It's written by Dr. B.J. Fogg. He's an organizational theorist. And as you think about how you're going to navigate through this telework and remote work experience, it's a good tool to use to think about the changes that you're making, where they'll fit in best in your daily routine, because we have 24 hours in a day, and we have so many competing priorities and responsibilities, both personally and professionally. And so that's a way. So for example, when I'm having my coffee, I fit in my devotional time. Sometimes I'm walking and I'm fitting in my devotional time. Or I'm talking with my mom and checking in with her. So there are different things that you can think about and do that give you back some of your time, and also allow you to implement new things into your daily experience that help to give you strength and get you through these challenging situations. In terms of what should be available to you when you are working from home, some of the things that I recommend to employers and management teams, first is a business continuity plan, and different plans for different parts of the organization. So it could be, a business continuity plan for the new employee hiring process and onboarding process. It could be for how you're going to handle what people do when they do come to work. Are you going to test them for COVID-19, do a questionnaire, etc.? So, being strategic and thinking about the systems, the policies, the processes, the procedures, and best practices for telework is really key to ensuring that you have a successful telework model. So the telework policies will be tied to the company's vision and mission and core values. It will look at things like, your workspace. How are you set up at home? Do you have a private area that you're working from? How is your technology set up? What are the expectations around performance, productivity? How is your employer engaging you? Looking at technology hygiene, how is data being stored? What are the cybersecurity matters that need to be addressed to ensure that the company's data as well as client data is kept safely and maintained safely? Do you need privacy screens on your desktop, laptop, or any other devices that you're using? Corporate governance, protection of intellectual property, how is that going to be handled and managed? Internet, that's another big thing. Sometimes employees are running into challenges with that because you have so many people on the internet throughout the day, not only in your home, but in your community. And so if the children are doing their schoolwork and they're online, and and let's say you're married and you and your spouse are both online, that's a lot of bandwidth that's being used. So thinking about that and how you're going to navigate that is really important as well. The communication tools are important. What tools will your employer be using so that you can communicate with them, you can communicate with your coworkers and colleagues, your managers, supervisors, as well as clients? There are a number of tools out there to use, from Adobe Connect, Zoom, Google Hangouts, GoToMeeting, Microsoft Teams, Skype. And so there's so many that you can consider that have to be kind of vetted through. And then figuring out how to use them and use them successfully to communicate and to do the work that is before you. Also, there are a number of HR considerations as well. There is the talent acquisition planning piece. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later. How do you bring in new team members? But there's the whole thing around compensation and benefits, and the manager and employee relations. How do you deal with challenges and conflicts that come up? What's the learning and professional development process going to be when you're working remotely? Performance management, productivity, what are the expectations? How will you know if you are achieving them, based on your employer's expectations? There's compliance concerns around telework and OSHA regulations. There's the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, timekeeping policies, disaster preparedness, violence prevention. So these are just some of the things. There's several more, but these are some of the things that you should expect from your employer, and employers should be prepared to address and support their employees when they are working from home.
Wow, and I thought our jobs as employees were challenging, but it sounds like employers have just a ton of stuff to worry about right now,
Yes.
which is really, really difficult. So maybe a little empathy for our employers is in order as well.
Absolutely.
Well, with that, you know, whether or not we have all the tools and resources we need right now to feel successful in our work at home, we still might be feeling distressed. So Sal, you've had a lot of experience working with people, even people going through some very scary, some very dark times. What lessons can we take away for how we should work through high levels of distress?
So in high levels of stress, we are in those elevated emotional states, and our fight or flight response is going to kick in, and it's going to overwhelm us. It's going to make us feel this flood of emotional discomfort, and it will even turn into physical symptoms as well. So what we want to do in those states is know when it's appropriate to take a break, to disengage, and to create some grounding techniques, meaning just being aware of your environment. But before we do that, you want to go through a bit of an assessment. And I use the acronym TOUGHS with all my clients to use and to pull from their back pocket in these times. So T stands for thoughts. What are the thoughts that are flooding your system at that point? What are the ones that are pulling your attention and energy? And are they meaningful? Are they useful? Right? Are they adding betterment to your life? Or are they exacerbating and compounding on your confusion, your stress, your disappointment, whatever you're dealing with in that moment, right? Because we have close to 70,000 thoughts a day. If we don't monitor, if we don't discipline, if we don't regulate those thoughts, what they do is they'll create maladaptive patterns for ourselves. And science tells us that 90% of those thoughts are coming from the day before. So if we're not staying consistent and disciplined with those thinking patterns, then we're just going to create these beliefs that are going to dig into our subconscious brain, and it's going to start to paint the window to the world outside, right? Without us even knowing. So being cognizant of that. Next is knowing urges, right? Those are our impulses. In that moment, we sometimes will have an urge to lash out if we're angry. If we're sad, we have maybe an urge to isolate, to alienate ourselves. But knowing how we operate is going to be huge. Knowing the urges that we usually succumb to and the ones that make things worse in those moments, right? So a tactic that I use with all my clients when dealing in those high emotional states is urge surfing, right? Because usually our brain will say, okay, I'm going to either act off of my emotions. So you'll do emotion-driven behavior by lashing out, by, whatever that looks like for you. If you're angry, you're sad, you're confused, you're uncertain. Like a lot of people will displace their emotion onto other people when they don't know how to take responsibility for themselves. But remember, responsibility is going to give you a lot of freedom and control. It's going to be scary in the beginning, but it's going to be giving you the kind of the offset goal and understanding that you can take a hold of these emotions and they're not as bad as we think, right? Like Shakespeare said, nothing is either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. Thinking is what's going to change your perception and your interpretation of the environment. So we want to make sure that our thinking patterns are encouraging us, are building us, are allowing us to work towards whatever we are aligning our goals and vision of life with. So after you assess your urges, look at your feelings, right? What are the emotions that you're dealing with in this time? We call it emotional labeling. What this allows you to do is to disengage from the emotion, basically saying, I am not the emotion, it's just something I'm experiencing. Because by definition, it's something that's fleeting. Emotions don't come to stay, they come to pass. But a lot of us don't know that. We feel as if this is permanent, right? It's going to last forever. This pain's never going to go away. And in that moment, it's going to be hard to really conceptualize that. But being open to the emotion and seeing it for as it is and not worse than, and naming it is going to be huge, in accepting it. And then allowing you to transition towards the stage of expressing it, finding something that's suitable for you. whether that's going outside and taking a run, right? For me, what I like to do is I exercise. That's huge for me to expel those overwhelming built up feelings that I sometimes get from long work days or from, watching the news, what have you. But it's something to get it out to a different platform, right? Writing is good for a lot of people. That allows you to get it out on another platform and to see it from another point of view and perspective, right? It's creating an objective view of your feelings and emotions so that you can acquire more power and control in those situations, as opposed to feeling as if it is who you are, right? Separating your emotion from your identity, saying it's not who I am. It's not the construct of self here. Because once you do that, then it latches on to your sense of self. And then you're basically communicating to your brain that you have less control in those moments. And then lastly is your sensations, your physical response, right? What's happening on the physiological level. This is really the first line of defense that we want to kind of acknowledge and be conducive of in those moments, because that's what's going to happen first. Your body's going to respond by saying, what do I do with this emotion that I'm given, right? Because we're used to assessing our environment from threat to reward and everything in between. That's what emotions do for us. So emotions aren't good and bad, right? They're pleasant and unpleasant. That's kind of the message that I try to relate to my clients. Because when you say something is bad, your brain says, I don't want to sit with it. Therefore, you distract, detract, and you avoid it. And when you do that, yes, you'll get moments of reprieve. You'll feel less anxious sometimes if you're completely distracted, like, play a video game, watch a TV show, or, just completely disengage. And it's good in those high levels of distress. It is. But there are times where we want to sit with it and we want to acknowledge it. We want to accept that it's happening. But knowing which time makes most sense in that moment, right? So feelings, really identify those feelings and noticing what happens on the bodily level. Because sometimes we need some deep breathing, right? We need to massage that parasympathetic nervous system that releases the acetylcholine, which allows us to be more mindful, more grounded, and more focused in the moment. It'll activate something I'm sure you guys are familiar with, your reticulating activating system, right? That allows you to focus on what's most important, right? Do that assessment of what's most meaningful in the moment. Your brain is going to fixate on irrational things, like I'm going to get the virus. My family's going to get the virus. We're going to die from this. It's going to be devastating. There's nothing I can do about it. Okay, like that's what's happening. In that moment, what's most effective is using a concept known as radical acceptance. That doesn't mean you're being toxically positive, saying everything's going to be okay and only looking at the silver lining. What it's saying is, what is out of my control? You're identifying that, what I can't do anything about. And then you're shifting your focus and attention on things you can do something about, right? I can go outside, get some fresh air. I can go to the gym, of course, do the preventative measures, right? Notice your comfortability, but being smart about it, being informed and educated, but not being obsessed and overworked by this constantly changing, threat that's outside of us, known as the virus. So having that awareness and knowing where your control is going to be huge, and just being honest and genuine and open about that. Because I think a lot of times we try to lie to ourselves about what we can and cannot do, right? Emotional strength isn't pretending as if nothing's wrong. It's living up to your values and morals and doing what you believe is going to be helpful for you and what's within your control. Yeah, that's kind of my takeaways for that one.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot. I mean, it really feels to me like there's a wealth of information, Sal and Deborah too, that you both are sharing here, where we're just barely scratching the surface of what we could be talking about. To our audience, I just want to let everyone know that we're about 3 minutes from when I wanted to open up questions to you. So if you haven't yet thought of a question, please go ahead and put that down and send that to us. Before we go to audience questions, Deborah, I was hoping you could just give us some tips as to how we can set better boundaries with our family members that we're living with our roommates, and really just kind of help us know how to engage on that level as well. Because, boundaries with bosses is one thing, or with coworkers, but most of our coworkers now are those people that we live with. So we need some additional help there. What would you say to help us with that?
Sure, sure. So the first thing I would say is be proactive. Have a dialogue with your family, your roommates, persons that you live with to come up with a plan and a schedule that works for you, that works for them, and that keeps everybody moving forward in a positive way. And be realistic about that. If you need flexible work hours, talk with your employer about that. As an example, one of our clients allowed their employees to begin their work schedule as early as 5 a.m. and work as late as 10 p.m. And so as long as they're getting their 8 hours in and they're getting their work done within that time frame, the client is happy. There are a lot of benefits to that as well, because it allows you as the employee to take a break when you need to take a break. If you need to work with children on schoolwork, you need to walk the dog, or you just want to take a walk or read a book or exercise or whatever the case may be, it creates more flexibility in your day. So think about what your needs are and talk with your family members as well as your employer, if it's applicable, to ensure that you have the kind of schedule that will work for you. The other thing I think is important is to ensure that you keep your work day as normal or as close to what it was as possible. What do I mean by that? If you were taking a lunch break or taking a break, ensure that you're taking those breaks for yourself. One of the challenges that we have with working from home is we sit a lot and we're not getting up and being active and moving around. So try, every hour if possible to, just get up and, walk from where you're working to someplace else in the house, walk outside, get a breath of fresh air, etc. But take care of yourself in the process. Set work hours, whatever your hours are going to be, establish them and try to stick to them. One of the concerns that we're seeing in the surveys and all other information that we're reading is that people are working a lot longer. They've converted their commuting hours to work hours. So they're not only working their normal 8-hour day, they're working their commuting time and they're working longer because they're at home, and it just happens. And so creating some systems and commitments for yourself that allows you to manage that is really important. Having a dedicated workspace, if you can, is also helpful, so that you can have private time. You have time away from the family, from the children, from your roommates, whatever the case may be, so that you have time. Here in my home, I have my office here. I also have a larger space and library downstairs in my home. So when I shut it down, I walk out of this space and I am now in my home and spending time with me and whatever else I may be doing. When you say you're done, be done with your day. Ensure that you're staying in communication with others. So, not only your coworkers and your managers and such for work purposes, but, family, friends, stay grounded, find ways to keep yourself grounded. We talked about the, kind of living the happy life in the midst of a crisis, in the midst of a challenge. That's something that we can do to help as well. The reading, having mentors, advisors, journaling, praying if you pray, or meditating, finding those things that help to keep you, in a grounded place and a place that keeps you as happy and as content as possible is really important. So those are a few tips that I would offer to everyone.
Wow, wonderful. And there are so many tips that kind of both of you are saying the same thing, and it's really validating for me to hear that, in some ways I've been doing the right things, in other ways, okay, I've got some improvement to do. For me, it's been challenging to kind of set a specific schedule and stick with it. So I realized if I'm not up and working at 8 a.m., then I'm going to have a hard time hitting the hours that I want to work by the time I need to shut down around 4:30. And so one other interesting thing for me has been I've started working a Tuesday to Saturday schedule, because some of the coaching work that I do is with people when they're outside of their standard working hours. And people have been very understanding about me not being accessible and able to work on Mondays as well. So that's been encouraging. Okay, well, with that, we're going to go to audience questions. Again, if you haven't yet submitted one, you can do so in the Q&A or also in the chat. But with that, we'll just try and keep our answers to these short so we can do a few more of them. But Alex has written a question, which either of you can take. How can we help our children understand and cope with the stress of the situation? For example, she says, we can't go trick-or-treating. How can we help them cope with the disappointment?
So if you don't mind, I can take this real quick, Deborah. So I work with a lot of families, and there's been a lot of difficulty with kind of keeping the kids stable, right, and kind of keeping them organized and structured. So that is going to be huge, having organization, structure, and scheduling for your kids at this time, because they need to know what to expect. A lot of my clients that are in high school or college, they loved getting back into school because it created structure in their day. Like, they can only go without that for so long, to where the brain kind of, will give into its maladaptive, habits and behaviors and its vices. But also making sure that your kids have healthy social interactions. I know right now it's a different climate, and they can't go out, to parties and hanging out with big groups of people, but making sure that they're still engaging with their friends, with calling, texting, Snapchat. I know, they get into that social media a lot, but it's a way for them to connect with their friends. They need that right now. They really do. So making sure that is strong for them, still getting them outside, making sure they're getting the fresh air, monitoring their screen time is going to be huge. I usually suggest that parents don't give more than 2 to 2.5 hours of screen time a day. I know it can be tough, but trying to stay consistent with that, making sure sleep schedules are doable and are healthy, right? I got so many clients, teenage clients specifically, they're going to bed like 4 or 5 in the morning, and they're waking up like 2, 3 in the afternoon. That's, especially before school, and then they transition to school, and then it's just their circadian rhythm is just so thrown off, which plummets your mood, and it makes you irritable all day. So being wary of that, but making sure that they're not just cooped up, and you can be creative. Like with I saw that she wrote something about trick-or-treating. Like right now, my sister, what she decided to do, because she's got young kids, is she's having about 10 people over, her kids' friends and some parents, and they're doing just like basically this little Halloween trail in their backyard. I mean, they have a lot of land, so they're able to do that, but doing something like that, and where at each they have these little stations where they can pick up candy for themselves. So it's people within your social circles, people you've been exposed to. So, that you tell them beforehand, make sure you got no symptoms, obviously. But, being creative and validating their emotions and feelings, right? Being empathetic, saying, yeah, I see that this is a tough time for you. This is hard. This is hard for a lot of people. But let's make use of this in the best way possible. You're teaching them to be creative, thinking outside the box. You can add a lot of benefit if you do it in the right way.
And what I would just add to what Sal has said is, thinking about virtual social opportunities for children. For example, there's a game, I am the director of Christian education at my church. And with our children and youth, we do, when they do their lessons, we also do games. And there's a game called Kahoot. You can take it and you can build, whatever, kind of questions you want to build. And have the children maybe get together with their friends on Zoom and play a game and have prizes and things like that. That's a way to, create a social outlet, for the children when they're limited in terms of their interactions with their friends right now. So activities like that. Also, there are communities that are starting things called learning pods. And so and this is where, you know, again, like Sal was saying, people in the community, you all know each other, you have relationships with each other, you know how you are taking care of your family and your home in COVID-19. And so they are sharing the load in terms of how they are helping their children to be educated and continue with their learning during this COVID-19 experience. So you can just Google that, learning pods. There are some employers that are actually supporting their workforce in this regard. So those are some things to think about. And when Sal was talking about Halloween, it reminded me of something that, you know, we're doing. I live in Howard County, but I worship in Baltimore City, and where I worship is in, you know, an urban underserved community. And so what we're doing for Harvest Fest, we're doing something called Harvest Fest. And so we'll have music outside, you know, of the church. We'll have candy and things like that, and, you know, some information about healthy living as well. And so those are, you know, finding things that, you know, keep them grounded, keep them connected, just like we're as adults working to be connected with our social community. Doing the same thing for the children, I think, becomes essential to help them cope through this challenging time.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at a couple of the questions here that both have to do with balance. Can really relate to Nika. She says that as an entrepreneur, it's already challenging to create working hours. However, now that we are managing the children's school day, it seems to be a constant struggle in our house. I tend to end up working throughout the evening because I was distracted with making sure they have what they need or doing what they're supposed to do. How do I keep their day from taking over my day so that I'm not working until 12 a.m. regularly? And with that, I'll also add in what Jackie had said about feeling that a perfect work-life balance doesn't exist even in the best of times, but what are some ways to create as much balance as possible while also dealing with the emotions of having to drop certain balls to keep others? For example, feeling guilt and anxiety over prioritizing certain responsibilities over others on a day-to-day basis. So since we've only got a couple more minutes, if you could each give maybe a just quick pro tip or best idea that you have around how to achieve that balance when really we're going to be dropping balls, we're going to have to prioritize family members and some of that.
Yeah, I heard we in there, so that gives me the inclination that there's you and a significant other. If that is the case, this is where we team up. This is where we really rely and you know, kind of back each other up on these instances and saying, hey, you know, in this amount of time, let's have this be the time where the kids come to you if they have an issue. And in this amount of time, they come to me if they have an issue, right? So setting those frameworks so you know from, you know, 8 in the morning to 12 p.m., you are going to be locked in on work and you can just focus on that, and your significant other will take the responsibility of the kids, and then, you know, vice versa on the other end of the day. So that'll create a little bit more balance, but also being patient with yourselves. Yes, our priorities are changing like crazy right now because everything's changing and evolving, and we can't really make sense of everything in the moment, and we're still adjusting in a lot of ways. But, you know, just giving yourself an empathetic voice, supporting yourself, encouraging yourself, and identifying what you're still doing well, right? My mentor would always tell me when I make a mistake or I do something outside of you know, what's useful for the company. He would always just say, "You're still doing 1,000 things right. Be mindful of that. You're still doing 1,000 things right. If your kids are getting the food, they got a roof over their head, right? You're showing them love. You're killing it right now. But just be mindful that things are changing, and be patient and empathetic towards your situation."
Deborah, anything to add on that? How to find balance?
I don't, other than the things I've already, you know, shared, which is, you know, really just thinking about how you're going to run your day. And reaching some agreements with your family members, your loved ones, your roommates, whoever it is that's a part of your household. And I think, you know, so if you're a single parent and you don't have the you know, the benefit of having someone help you with the child care concerns, then it's really, you know, a balancing act in terms of thinking about how you're going to do that. So you may want to think about, like I said, the learning pod idea, or if there are some other family members that may be able to help in some way, Those are some of the considerations that may be something you'll think about.
Great, thank you. And as a last question before I'll hand this back to Kelsey, wanted to get any advice from you both on how to continue networking through this. Do you have any cool ideas that can help those who are struggling with Zoom fatigue, which, trust me, I can relate.
Absolutely. I think you're taking advantage of all the platforms we have in terms of, technologically based, such as, LinkedIn, Alignable. You still got Facebook. You still have like Instagram. There's things where you can connect with people on, and still kind of getting that word out of your business. I think is going to be huge during this time. And I know we were getting a little bit of Zoom fatigue, but these are great ways to work from anywhere. Right? You can be at a coffee shop, you can be at home, you can be at the office, wherever, and you have this application. Because this has just catapulted my business in terms of making me kind of appeal to more people. Like I can go out of county, out of state. I have 2 clients that are in Texas right now that I've acquired during the pandemic. So I have more ground that I can cover because of technology, because of teletherapy, because of virtual sessions. So, making use of that and healthy, appropriate, and kind of balance-oriented ways can be really useful at this time.
Anything to add to that, Deborah?
No.
Yeah, it strikes me that, Sally, you make a good point, right? There are opportunities that come with the challenges, opportunities looking like having expanded geographic reach that we would have thought possible before, and so that comes with its own set of challenges, but certainly really useful if we can find a way to tap into it. Well, with that, I'd love to ask both of you, how can the audience connect with you if they want to after this Zoom webinar, and then any last words of wisdom that you'd like to add before I hand this back to Kelsey?
Deborah, I'll let you go.
Okay, so I'll begin by saying, first, take good care of yourselves, be patient with yourselves, your family, stay grounded, find ways to, connect with others to keep yourself healthy and supported. Have mentors, advisors, people that you can call on, to provide you with support. There are 2 ways that we can look at life. We can look at the glass as half full or half empty. We can look at challenging situations and they can make us bitter or they can make us better. And so, I like to focus on how to be better in the midst of a crisis. There's a silver lining in everything that we experience and we go through in life, and there's nothing new under the sun. So these kinds of situations that we're dealing with, COVID-19, for example, is new to us, but there's been pandemics before. There's been, these kinds of challenges. So, we have to, as Sal was saying earlier, find the resilience in ourselves, and be able to, to come through this successfully. We are going to, COVID-19 has touched every single one of us in some way. We know someone in our family or friend or coworker connection that has been impacted by this unfortunate pandemic. But keeping ourselves in a positive space and finding the things that we can do, the resources, the tools, the people, etc., that will help us to stay there stay positive is critically important in successfully getting through a challenging situation. So just remember, if you don't remember anything else, don't be bitter, be better, and find the silver lining in the situation. And just sit down and think about it, reflect on it, pray about it, meditate about it to come up with a plan, and be flexible with yourself. Modify that plan. As time goes on, things change. Tomorrow you'll have additional information that you didn't have today. So make adjustments and be kind to yourself, be patient with yourself. Love yourself and love others.
Thanks, Deborah. And your website,
Oh yeah, that
hranew.com,
part.
right?
I forgot that part.
That's okay.
So my website is www.hranew.com. My email address, you can reach me at ceo@hranew.com, or you can reach me at Deborah, spelled the biblical way, DEBORAH @hranew.com. So those are the ways you can reach me. My number is 240-401-7737. That's my business mobile. So if you have questions, if I can help you with anything, please don't hesitate to give me a call or send me an email.
Great, thank you so much. Sal, we only have a moment, but I wanted to give you a chance to say how people can connect and a last word of wisdom as well.
Okay, of course. I'm going to just piggyback off Deborah a little bit. Two things that I think are going to be really important right now is one, avoiding all or nothing thinking, right? And I think Deborah alluded to this, being flexible, right? Right now, life is very gray. So we've got to prepare for that in an adaptable way. You know, saying we can't say that if things all have to be a certain way in order to feel good, otherwise it's terrible, right? We've got to adjust, we've got to be flexible. And lastly, showing gratitude. Deborah alluded to this as well. Something that I've been having my clients do is that at the end of each night, during their Monday through Friday work days, or depending on how you've been adjusting your work schedule, is asking yourself or writing these things down, 3 things that are going well and why. Science tells us that if you do this for 60 days, it will increase life satisfaction and happiness by 80%. 80%. It's literally has pulled people out of despairing, depressive states. So those are 2 things. Avoid all or nothing in black and white thinking, be flexible, and show gratitude each and every day on what we still have that is going well in our life and that we're, excited and thankful for. And guys, a great way to connect with me is a couple of different platforms. I have my practice website, which is www.cmhahelps.com. And then my individual website is www.salstherapycorner, spelled all normal.com. And lastly, you can reach me at my email at sal@cmhahelps.com. And if you want to reach out just for like a discussion on kind of how to better navigate through these things, I'm always open to that. Absolutely. I do free 15-minute consultations that I'd be happy to talk with any of you about. And I appreciate all of you taking the time out of your days to come here and listen and acquire new information to better your situation. This means that you're not just giving up, right? You're not creating a learned helplessness because there's a lot of things we can't control. You're identifying what you can do about the situation, and you're taking a hold and taking advantage of those resources. So kudos to all of you.
Wow. Well, thank you both so very, very much for coming and sharing your wisdom with us. This is really great, very validating, very helpful. To everyone in the audience, thank you so much for coming as well. I hope it was helpful, that you were able to take away at least one thing that you'll be able to use immediately, and maybe a lesson that you'll be able to apply for the rest of your life. This was the last Celerate of 2020. So we'll be back in 2021, I believe February, for our next Celerate event, which will be potentially another virtual panel, but we will see. And these events don't happen without a lot of help. So a big thank you to the wonderful staff at the Howard County Chamber of Commerce, Leonardo, Lynn, Alex, and Taylor. Thank you for hosting this event. To the Celerate committee, this is a group of folks who help pull together these. It's certainly a team effort. I'm just the public face of it today, but thank you so much to them for all the work that you've done to bring these questions together, and just for all the work that you do to present these professional development trainings and conversations. And to our YPN board, thank you very much. The YPN wouldn't exist without the work that you're doing. And so thank you especially for pivoting on this very challenging season that we're in, to still continue the work that we've been doing of connecting people and doing the professional development that we do. And none of this would happen without our sponsors. So a big thank you again to them. I'm going to hand it back over to Kelsey. And if she has any other words of wisdom or any other details to share, we'll wrap up just about 3 or 4 minutes late here. Again, thank you much for letting me moderate and for participating and being involved in this Celerate panel today.
Well, now that we're a little bit over time, glad that the discussion could continue here today. Just a quick reminder, we've got some really exciting events coming up here with the Chamber over these next few weeks. So look for those in your email inbox. Feel free to check out our Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn posts for seeing what's coming up at the Chamber. But I'm going to close it out and hope everybody has a great rest of your day.
All right, well, thank you both so much again. I guess, Alex, you're now the host, so, or maybe